All right. Well, we're going to try some technology again today. So do I got to hit a button to make it start show up, or which button?
Forward button. Go button.
Just the side arrow? All right. And so when I hit the side arrow, a picture will pop up. All right, sweet. So that was kind of my question. Do I got to turn it on? No? Okay. Well, it's awesome to see everybody here. I had an interesting week, so I'm going to get through this. You know, I have been pretty reserved up here recently, but no telling how this might go today, but we'll try to get through it. We were talking about, last week, I thought I had a clever title, Obedient as a Hound, and I said that we'd follow through this week with the second part of that. I started reading 1 Peter 1, 13 through 16, so I'm going to read that again. It says, "Therefore, with minds that are alert and fully sober, set your hope on the grace to be brought to you when Jesus Christ is revealed at his coming. As obedient children, do not conform to the evil desires you had when you lived in ignorance, but just as he who called you is holy, so be holy in all you do, for it is written, 'Be holy because I am holy.'" So we talked about obedience and holiness, and that one of the benefits of that is that we bring joy to God. And I don't want to understate that, like, oh yeah, we bring joy to God. Like, that's a very important thing. That's something that we should strive to do on a daily basis, on a continual basis. And obedience does that. We looked at Jonah and the chaos that ensued when he decided to be disobedient. The ship was rocking and people thought they were going to die. And we saw in Genesis chapter 6, when pretty much all of mankind decided they'd be disobedient, that angered God. And then we know the chaos that ensued after that with the flood. And so today I want to talk about how obedience develops and why it's to our benefit to be obedient. So often in Christianity, we look at Christianity and the Bible and God's standards as a long list of do nots. Don't do this. Don't do that. But in reality, these rules, if we want to call them rules, are a guide that for true joy in your life. And so I want to emphasize that point, and I want you to keep it in your mind as we talk about all these things, is that for a Christian, obedience to God unlocks joy. And I was going to say fun, because there's a lot of things that are fun in the midst of serving God. But joy is different, because sometimes things that bring joy and fulfillment in your life really aren't that much fun per se. So let's go to Jonah Chapter 2. And I want to just keep going with this situation. "Now the Lord provided a huge fish to swallow Jonah, and Jonah was in the belly of the fish for 3 days and 3 nights. From inside the fish, Jonah prayed to the Lord his God and said, 'In my distress I called to the Lord, and he answered me. From deep in the realm of the dead I called for help, and you listened to my cry. You hurled me into the depths, into the very heart of the seas, and the current swirled about me. All your waves and breakers swept over me. I said, I have been banished from your sight, yet I will look again towards your holy temple. The engulfing waters threatened me, and the deep surrounded me. Seaweed was wrapped around my head. To the roots of the mountains I sank down. The earth beneath barred me in forever. But you, Lord my God, brought my life up from the pit. When my life was ebbing away, I remembered you, Lord, and my prayer rose to your holy temple. Those who cling to worthless idols turn away from God's love for them. But I, with shouts of grateful praise, will sacrifice to you. What I have vowed I will make good. I will say, salvation comes from the Lord. And the Lord commanded the fish to vomit Jonah out onto dry land." So, just makes me curious. I'm always curious. I'm a curious kind of guy. Like, what was going on in Jonah's mind when they pitched him over the edge of the boat? You know? I think that his survival was far from certain. And I think that we see in what he wrote that in his own mind, his survival was far from certain. He was super happy that God chose to save him and give him another chance. And he acknowledges in there, like he realized like people that cling to worthless idols deny themselves the true gift of having a relationship with the living God. It says they turn away from God's love for them, and that's not to our benefit. So let's go on to Jonah chapter 3, verses 1 and through 3, halfway. It says, Then the word of the Lord came to Jonah a second time. Go to the great city of Nineveh and proclaim to it the message I give you. Jonah obeyed the word of the Lord and went to Nineveh. So, nothing like a little swim and a few nights in a fish to motivate you to want to be obedient. And we can kind of, I say that somewhat sarcastically, but how often in our lives do we have self-inflicted suffering that if we had been obedient to God, and I'm not talking about like we could discuss sickness, and I'm not even going to go there. I'm talking about simply like guys, like we know how a godly man would treat their wives, and then we don't do it, and there's not harmony in our household. Sometimes there's fighting for a few days, right? And then when you talk to one of your buddies and you're relating how this fight got started, and they're chuckling, they're like, "Well, you are stupid. You'd think you'd learn by now," right? But we, like in these small things, we choose to be disobedient to God's standard, and we have self-inflicted consequences for it. And we see that in Jonah. Some people, the phrase "go big or go home," some of us like to go big. Generally speaking, I like to fight for a week if we're going to, start right after church and figure it out right before we go back to church. That seems like a good, right? Huh? Don't act like that hasn't happened. Yeah. But anyways, self-inflicted wounds, things that if we were obedient wouldn't happen. Let's go to Hebrews chapter 12. And we're going to read verses 4 through 11. Hebrews chapter 12, verses 4 through 11. In your struggle against sin, you have not yet resisted to the point of shedding your blood. And have you completely forgotten this word of encouragement that addresses you as a father addresses his son? It says, My son, do not make light of the Lord's discipline, and do not lose heart when he rebukes you, because the Lord disciplines the one he loves, and he chastens everyone who he accepts as his son. Endure hardships as discipline. God is treating you as his children. For what children are not disciplined by their father? If you are not disciplined, and everyone undergoes discipline, then you are not legitimate, not true sons and daughters at all. Moreover, we have all had human fathers who disciplined us, and we respected them for it. How much more should we submit to the Father of spirits and live? They disciplined us for a little while as they thought best, but God disciplines us for our good in order that we may share in his holiness. No discipline seems pleasant at the time, but painful. Later on, however, it produces a harvest of righteousness and peace for those who have been trained by it. So just as a side note, I want you to keep in mind, the phrase, in your struggle against sin, you have not resisted to the point of shedding your own blood. I want you to keep in mind, about our level of commitment to live righteously, like how much effort we are willing to put into something. Like, we'll give you an example. When we were hunting our dogs one day, they started on one side of a ridge, and they went down to a creek bottom, up to the top of another hill, to another creek bottom that was named something totally else, up onto the top of the mountain, and down the other side. And I hustled as fast as I could that whole way because I didn't want wolves to catch the dogs out there because there was wolves. And I went. And when I was super tired and thought I didn't go anymore, I went some more. Now fast forward, on Thursday, I went to go arrest a guy, and he and his buddy took off running. And by the time, so we ran across about like the narrow part of a 80-acre field. And then we ran down into Post Creek, and I was narrowing the gap. I was proud of myself. And but then he jumped into Post Creek and went to the other side, and he was on the other side taking a breather, and I was on my side. And I was like, I think I put enough effort into this. I don't want to get my boots wet. I don't want to have to, I'm good. So we sat there and talked trash to each other for a little while, and then he ran into the woods. But I had a radio, and so my partners caught him on the other side. But my point being is that there's a difference in my level of effort that I was willing to put into situations. And if you look at your life critically, you'll see that there is sin in your life that you look at less critically than other. And especially you look at sin in your life less critically than you look at sin in other people's lives. It's just human nature. But we need to look at ourselves critically when it comes to obedience and holiness. So I pushed the button once. Did something happen? Oh, yeah. So we remember that Rusty was a cute little puppy. Super cute little puppy. Right? And it's partly Jen's fault. And then, remember that. Right. And so there's Rusty as an adolescent. And we talked about the tracking collar and that it was becoming necessary because he was a young teenager and he wanted to start testing boundaries, right? And nothing was good enough for Rusty. If you put him in the kennel, he wanted to be in the yard. If you put him in the yard, he wanted to be outside the yard. If you let him outside the yard, he wanted to go to someone else's property, If you let him chase the drag, he wanted to chase the sheep. It just nothing ever good enough. Just test. And so by August, we determined that it was time to put Rusty to work because Jen was mad at me. No, I'm just joking. No, he was on everybody's nerves, and it was time to see if he was going to do what he was made to do. So, and there he's spoiled. Right. So we knew that we needed some help, and so through a long, interesting sort of events that I won't tell you all the details this time, but that's Willow, and Willow is a 4-year-old fully trained hound from a federal trapper in Lewistown, and he said, hey, you need a good dog to train your puppy. There's nothing better than a well-broke dog to teach your dog how to hunt. And I was like, sweet. And so I told Jen, I was like, great news, we're getting another hound. And it was necessary and important and all those things. Sort of like the side-by-side, But anyway, so we got Willow. And in typical Levi fashion, I was like, we need to make this a thing, And I was like, we need to go on a Montana safari. We're not just going to go on some little old hunting trip. And so we packed up, the boys and I, to go to Terry, Montana. Does anybody know where Terry, Montana is? Yeah. So you go to Billings, and you keep driving for hours. Yeah, that's where Terry is. I didn't quite realize that at the time. I do now. So we showed up to Terry, Montana, and we're camping along the Yellowstone River there, catching fish. You see Rusty being Rusty. It was awesome. We're full-fledged houndsmen, and I'd called ahead because I had awesome dogs, and I said, you line up as many cornfields as you can for me, and we'll catch every raccoon there because they eat the sweet corn there, and it's an ongoing battle in Terry every year. The raccoons come in hordes and destroy the corn crops. And so the guy said, all right, we'll make it happen. So that night we got all ready. We got the dogs loaded up, and we headed out to go catch raccoons. And like I said, Willow knew her business, and so she got right to it. And Rusty, for all his confidence and assuredness that he wanted to go do his own thing all the time, everywhere, wouldn't leave our side. It was dark out. He had never been there before. And he kept looking at us like, boss, I don't know what's out there, but I'm pretty sure it's dangerous. And he wouldn't go anywhere. And, it's like, it was amazing. At home, you're always like, Rusty, get back here, Rusty, And I'm like, Rusty, go do something. Get out of here. Go, It's ridiculous. That was horrible. And only like Nehemiah can do. We're sitting there, it's like 12 in the morning, 1 in the morning, we've been fishing all day. And he's like, I thought Rusty was supposed to go hunt. And I was like, yeah, well, no kidding, so did I. And it got so disgusting. I can't even make this up. We saw 3 raccoons on the side of the road, and I let Rusty, and so Isaiah was like, they went that way. And I let Rusty go, and he ran off barking that way. Can't make this up. We couldn't even catch a raccoon that was standing on the side of the road with Rusty. And Isaiah and Nehemiah were so disgusted, they went in the truck and slept. And even when we did get one in the tree, they wouldn't even get up because they were so mad about it.
Except me.
Yep, Uriah got up. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there's no quitting him. But I thought, isn't that just so interesting? Don't we act like that as Christians? We just want to push on the boundaries. But then when things get a little scary, we want to be huddled right up next to God and have that sense of security. It's not a healthy way to live, because you lose out on opportunities, Like as Christians, we have all sorts of opportunities to witness, to share the love of Christ, to do all these things. But when we're out there, we're timid, we miss those opportunities. But if we're in here and we're acting rambunctious and not learning to be obedient to God, it's 2 things that are not working for growth. And so, like with Rusty, if he'd been paying attention at all, he knew that when he smelled a raccoon, he should go chase it. We'd been over that extensively. But it just didn't dawn on him that when it was dark and he wasn't comfortable at his own house causing mischief, that principle still applied. And I think there's a lot of things that we could apply that to in our lives about applying what we know as a Christian to when we're out in the real world. It's fun to go outside and recreate, especially when you feel secure. And it's fun to do, it's fun to live in the United States of America. Do you know that we feel so secure that we complain about just about everything? Now, I'm not saying any one of you individually, but I'm saying as Americans, we can complain about absolutely everything. Doesn't matter what it is. There's somebody that has a problem with it because we feel so absolutely secure. That is the downside of security. That is when security is not used appropriately. Jim Corbett was a British hunter naturalist who lived in India. And I was like, man, I shouldn't bring this up now that Nace and Bethany are in India, but I'm going to anyway. And he wrote a book called The Man-Eaters of Kumaon. And there was a tigress that hunted around the village of Thak. And she actually only killed 4 people. But the first person she killed was a little girl, and she did it in front of the whole village. The little girl was working in a garden, and the tigress came right in there and killed her and packed her away. And I think it killed 2 more men and 1 woman. But how she did it, and she would lay outside the village and roar sometimes, and she would prowl around, and they knew she was there, and everybody was scared to death. They were so scared that the whole village packed up and left. They said that village had been around for hundreds and hundreds of years, and it was the first time that everybody in that whole area left because they were so terrified of this tigress. And And so anyway, they begged Jim Corbett to come kill this tiger, and you should read the story. It's pretty interesting and scary. But he eventually does, and everybody comes back to the village. But security is important, and people that don't have a relationship with Christ don't have the security that we take for granted. A relationship with God through the blood of Jesus gives us security in this life and after. We have a security because we know that if we declare with our mouths that Jesus is Lord and believe in our hearts that God raised him from the dead, then we will be saved. That knowledge shouldn't be taken for granted. That security. Think about if that truth became not true anymore, how unnerving that would be. Every bit of our security would be whisked away. And we look out into our community, and there's lots of people that aren't living with that security because they haven't heard the truth. And just like, those people took the security of their village for granted. They didn't value it until it was whisked away by a tiger that, all things being equal, didn't kill that many people. There was one tiger in India killed over 400 people before Jim Corbett killed it. But she was just really terrifying how she went about things. But the point being is, we don't want to squander the gift that God gave us by being disobedient. I could go further down that road, but I want to go back and discuss obedience a little bit more in focus. So here the dogs loaded up. My buddy's hunting truck. So you see Rusty and you see Willow, and to the discerning eye, you see a third dog. Because it turns out that Willow's slower than Rusty, and so and my buddy had bought Rusty's sister, Lady, and so I convinced Jen, you guessed it, that we need another hound. So now we got Rusty, Willow, and Lady, and they're the real deal. Like, we are making things happen. So here we are at a tree. There's lots of things going on here. You can see Willow to the far left, and she's looking up and barking because there's a cat in the tree. And then you can see Rusty facing us, barking his head off, but he's just barking because he seems like it should be the thing that he should do. Because for once in his life, instead of getting yelled at for barking, Justin is encouraging him to bark. And then you see Lady on the other side, and she's somewhere in the middle. She might know there's a cat up there, but she doesn't really care. And so I discovered a very frustrating thing about cat hunting is that as long as they run along the ground, the dogs are in it. They know what they're doing. But when the cat goes up a tree, that's kind of confusing to them, and there's just, the dogs aren't born knowing that cats can climb trees. And so it becomes confusing. And so, and I'm just like, for heaven's sake, Rusty, look up, Rusty, up, right? And I just wanted to show him that if he looked closely, can you see it? Can you see it? Yeah, if you look closely, you'll see the prize, right? And it becomes more clear in the tree. And so I wanted to correlate that to, bring me some tissues, would you? This isn't going to go well. Oh, right there. Oh, yes. Awesome. Thank you. I wanted to correlate that to our relationship with God, that if we would just look up, we would see God. We would would know what's important. We could focus on what we were supposed to be focused on, right? And then I wanted to show you that he finally got it figured out. One of the best things that ever happened to him is one of those lions jumped out of a tree, and he was like, "Oh, holy smokes, it comes out of the tree." And he chased until it ran up another tree, and he was on it. He was like, "Boss, they're in the tree. They're in the tree. They are in the tree." I was like, "No kidding. They're in the tree." How often do we, as Christians, we start fighting about things, and we're like, "Where's Jesus? Jesus is up there. You should be concentrating on him. He's up here, right? Up. No. We're all backwards yelling at the wrong thing. I wanted to tell you that if we get this figured out, we'll all just live happily ever after. It'd be awesome. We'll have some challenges in life, but that's okay, right? Not what we should hear from the pulpit. Yesterday I came home from hunting. I turned the dogs loose, and I wasn't paying attention, and they killed my daughter's rabbit. And you might be like, "Holy cow, Levi's crying over a rabbit." And I'm not. I'm crying because I look at my daughter's face and saw the hurt that I caused because I didn't pay attention enough to disciplining those dogs. I knew it was a problem with one of them. I saw in that dog that they wanted to eat that rabbit so bad they couldn't see straight. I dealt with it a little bit, and I thought it was good enough, and it wasn't. As soon as I wasn't there to pay attention, that dog went and got that thing. And I was disappointed in myself that I lacked the ability to discipline him, and that dog's disobedience caused a bunch of hurt in my family. It was ugly. And I couldn't even believe it. I was going to preach about obedient, stupid dogs today, and we're having a bad, I'll tell you something about me. Animals that hurt my family don't generally see a sunset the next day. That's how Levi rolls. I was mad. I got all those dogs, I threw them in the box, and I headed up to the mountains. And Jen's just like, "What are you going to do?" And I was like, "Probably nothing you want to hear about," and took off. You know, I prayed a lot while I was up there. Let's go to Colossians. Let's go to Colossians 3. "Since then you have been raised with Christ. Set your hearts on things above where Christ is, seated at the right hand of God. Set your minds on things above, not on earthly things. For you died, and your life is now hidden with Christ in God. When Christ, who is your life, appears, then you also will appear with him in glory. Put to death, therefore, whatever belongs to your earthly nature: sexual immorality, impurity, lust, evil desires, and greed, which is idolatry. Because of these things, the wrath of God is coming. You used to walk in these ways in the life you once lived. But now you must also rid yourselves of all such things as these: anger, rage, malice, slander, and filthy language from your lips. Do not lie to each other, since you have taken off your old self with its practices." We'll stop right there. I felt God impress upon me that I talk about obedience, but my own life shows that I lack in earnestness in keeping sin out of my life. I wanted to gloss over the deadly seriousness that disobedience and sin causes. I didn't fully appreciate the destructive nature of disobedience and sin. Like I said, I've killed more things than most of you could ever imagine. You could judge me for it or not. But when you hurt your daughter, that does something to a guy. Makes him reflect on the choices that he makes. I don't like it one bit. But I felt like God said, if you're going to tell him that disobedience hurts God, you better make it believable. Because God doesn't do things lightly. It's because it's a deep hurt to him. That's why he has righteous anger, is because we hurt him deeply with our disobedience. That's why he has righteous anger, because our sin hurts other people that he loves dearly. It's a serious thing. We shouldn't be cavalier about it. Hebrews talked about, have you resisted to the point of shedding your own blood? I wanted to get up here and kind of brag a little bit about what a good job I did training dogs and how they could catch cats, and people are having a great time and life's wonderful. I did not bargain on this at all. But this is the reality of life. It makes me more careful about the examples I choose to present, because I don't like hard lessons. And all things being equal, everybody in my family took it a lot better than I did, because I feel responsible. They're good sports about it. And I want you to know that every dog living at our house is still living at our house today. Probably some of you are wondering that. I laughed with my wife. I felt bad, after Lady did that. She wanted a friend bad, and she didn't have a friend in the Reed household. And I'm not going to say to you that, dogs don't have the same moral compass that we do, obviously. But leopard hounds are unique, that they're born wanting to please people. That's why they hunt so hard. Once they figure out what makes you happy, they go crazy to do it. And when she figured out that we weren't happy, she was a totally different dog wanting to figure out how to make us happy. And there was no making me happy. Fortunately, God is forgiving. We can make mistakes. We can hurt him. We can even hurt other people, and he'll forgive us. But our desire should be for righteousness. Let's keep reading verse 10. And have put on a new self, which is being renewed in the knowledge in the image of his Creator. Here there is no Gentile or Jew, circumcised or uncircumcised, barbarian, Scythian, slave or free, but Christ is all and is in all. Therefore, as God's chosen people, holy and dearly loved, clothe yourselves with compassion, kindness, humility, gentleness, and patience. Bear with each other and forgive one another. If any of you has a grievance against someone, forgive as the Lord forgave you. And over all these virtues, put on love, which binds them all together in perfect unity. Like I said, it wasn't my first choice to be able to come up here and be like, yeah, I made a gigantic mistake, but my family got to forgive me over it. But that's what happened. Like I said, it was a curveball. I was thinking, well, I'll tell you this, way less things than this have started some pretty good fights between me and Jen. And I was pretty sure, everybody's like, oh yeah, my dog this, my wife's going to divorce me. And I was thinking, this is a pretty big party foul. And but she took it so in stride, it's me, I'm still waiting for the reality to set in. I don't know, maybe she's just waiting until tomorrow to tell me how she really thinks. But she's been so understanding that's been a good thing. But I just want to emphasize that we should look critically at our lives, and we should determine what God wants of us, and we should look at those areas where we're obedient and where we're disobedient, and we should deal with that sin, that disobedience in our lives, so that it doesn't hurt us, so it doesn't hurt the people that we love, so it doesn't hurt God. See, all these things happen when we fail to live up to God's standard. Lots and lots of people get hurt, ourselves included. That's why God gave us Jesus, so that these sins can be forgiven, so that we can be restored in a relationship. But I think a lot of people think that forgiveness circumvents pain, and it doesn't. You can be forgiven and still have a painful experience in life because of the choices that you've made. But Jesus restores us, and that is the whole point to him dying on the cross, is that no matter what happens, no matter what goes on, we can be forgiven. We will be forgiven if we ask. So we're gonna enter into a time of communion, but beforehand, I just want to give us time to just for a few minutes, just reflect, pray, ask for forgiveness for anything that you might need for forgiveness for. Just seek God's guidance in your lives. Okay, what I'm going to have everybody do is just come on up and take the bread and the juice and go sit back down. And when I see everybody seated, then we'll proceed. So come on up. 1 Corinthians 11, verse 23. For I received from the Lord what I also pass on to you. The Lord Jesus, on the night that he was betrayed, took bread, and when he had given thanks, he broke it and said, "This is my body, which is for you. Do this in remembrance of me." In the same way, after supper, he took the cup, saying, "This cup is the new covenant in my blood. Do this whenever you drink it in remembrance of me." Go ahead with one more song, closing song.
Stand if you will, and we'll have one more song.